Okay, so doing it a little differently this week. As you can see, I'm sitting down, not my normal shita, not my normal style, but I've got a sore foot. So when the foot talks, I sit. We are in the second chapter of Makkot, which is going to be a totally different topic than the first chapter of Makkot. The first chapter of Makkot, we do have extra handouts there if people don't have their own copies. In the first chapter of Makkot, of course, we talked about the perjury of witnesses. In the second chapter of Makkot, we're going to be talking about accidental murder, what in English we would probably call manslaughter. And I'm not going to go too much into English law or American law, but in American law as well, we make a difference between when someone walks up behind someone with a knife and kills them, and when someone is doing a juggling show and they accidentally hit somebody with a knife and kill them.
I read that in the Torah, I think about 2-3 weeks ago.
Yes, exactly right.
The ox, what happens if he's cutting the tree?
Yep,
Oops,
exactly right. It's just Deuteronomy 19 is the section where it is, and we're now in Deuteronomy 26. So it was very, very recent that we read this in the weekly parasha. And there's something very unusual, which is in American law, we have different decisions of guilt depending upon how negligent the person was, how accidental was it, right? So for example, if I'm driving down the street and I'm texting on my phone and I'm eating a muffin and I run somebody down by going right through a red light, I accidentally killed them, but I was being pretty reckless when I did that. On the other hand, if I'm driving down the street, eyes on the road, hands on the wheels, and there's somebody who is fixing one of the lights and they fall in front of my car and I hit them, I killed them, and it was an accident, but I didn't do anything wrong. I was being a perfect driver, and there's no way I could have prevented it. So in Torah 2, we're going to see that there is some gradation, and that is something that is not obvious the first time you read through Deuteronomy 19. The first time you read through it, it seems like the Torah is saying, if you accidentally kill someone, even totally 100% absolute fluke accident, you still are liable for their death, and their avenging relative can kill you to take revenge. Right? That this is a concept the Torah describes, that there is a blood avenger, right? Not just the movie Avengers, but if I killed, I'm trying to think of somebody that, we all know has a brother. If I killed one of the Baldwin brothers, right, the other Baldwin brothers would be obligated by the ancient code to hunt me down and kill me, even if I killed the first one by accident. Right? That there was such a feeling of, you took the life of my loved one, that you have now earned death by me, not by the court, but by me. The Torah seems to imply that in all cases, even 100% accident up to negligence, that the blood avengers have the right to hunt me down. In order to prevent that, the Torah sets up cities of refuge, right? There are places that the accidental killer can run and hide so that they won't be killed by the blood avenger family members that are coming after me, going, how could you kill him? And trying to take their vigilante justice against me.
But they received pardon after the death of the supreme...
the high priest. Right. So in the Torah, it seems to imply then, again, this is only if you read through it superficially, because we're going to see the Mishnah is going to give us many more layers, seems to imply that if I was the accidental killer, I go to the city of refuge and I live there until the high priest dies. And when the high priest dies, everybody gets a free pass, and then I can leave. The Mishnah is going to show us that by a careful reading of the Torah, it's a little more complicated than that. So what the Mishnah is going to help us do is, first of all, pull out the 100% accidental death from the negligent accidental death. So murder is a whole different thing. This is still an accident, but there's an accident where you couldn't have avoided it, or it wouldn't have been reasonable for you to be taking more caution. And there is an accident where you really should have been able to avoid this, or you should have taken better precaution. Those two are going to be separate categories in the Mishnah, and the result is going to be different. So that's where we're going to start, and I'll give you a few more bits here and there as we go along to see the layers that the Mishnah helps us find. Sound good? Okay. I need a volunteer for someone I can interrupt. Mishnah 1, you ready to read?
Yes. The following go into punishments. One who kills an error.
Okay, so one sentence in, I already get to interrupt. So
Punishment here say Gorlin in exile.
Exile and banishment are the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Right? So exile means you have to leave the city, right? I mean, leave your town and go to one of the cities of refuge. And banishment here means going into a city of refuge. So first of all, we have to understand that there is a difference between killing in error and killing on purpose. Right? Killing on purpose is what we call murder, right? Where I hate him, bam. That's not what this is talking about. If you do that, excuse me, you get to go to court and you have to defend your innocence. And if you're found guilty, you are executed according to Jewish law. This is talking about when you kill an error. But there are errors and there are errors. So the Mishnah is going to help us understand the difference between the two different varieties. You okay? Oh, okay. You need glasses? Okay. Go ahead.
A, if, for instance, while he was pushing a roller on the roof and it fell down and killed somebody.
Go ahead and do B.
If while he was lowering a cask, it fell down and killed somebody.
And C.
If while coming down a ladder, he fell on somebody. He goes into bench.
All right. So A, B, and C are three examples of types of killing that is both accidental and the kind that makes you have to go and leave, has to make you go to one of the cities. So what do all three of these have in common? Well, I'm guessing that none of you here have ever used a roller on your roof, right? So in the ancient world, the roof was flat for most roofs, right? They didn't have our roofs with slopes. The roof was flat. And that meant that you would have to roll it flat. You'd have to make it level. And sometimes you would even put things on the roof that you had to roll. So you'd have a heavy roller on the roof. Well, if you've got a heavy roller on the roof and you are pushing it, it's a danger to anybody below. So too, if you have a cask, right? You've got a big barrel of wine or of olives or something, and you are lowering it from the roof, that was considered to be the more dangerous time. Right? Lowering was considered much more dangerous than lifting. And I don't know whether you've ever tried to lift or lower something that's very, very heavy. But when you're lifting, it is always under tension and you are always pulling and it's nice and smooth. When you're lowering, you have to let go. Right? If you don't let go, it won't go down. So as you let go, there's a much higher chance that it'll go completely. So the lowering is considered more dangerous. And so too, when you're coming down a ladder, same thing. When you're coming down a ladder, it's the backwards way. It's harder to see where you're going. That's when it's more likely that you're going to slip and hurt something. Maybe yourself or maybe somebody underneath you. So for all three of these are considered cases of negligence. This is where the accident could have been prevented if you were being more careful. Still an accident, but there is more responsibility on you for these three cases. And that means exile. Banishment.
But what happens if you are downloading the
barrel, the cask, yeah.
No, the ladder.
Right, you're coming down the ladder.
Ladder, and there's a problem of the ladder that is broken, and you didn't know, and you fell, and you died because of that. Can you punish the owner of the ladder?
So if the ladder, yes,
it's not so accidental.
Yes. So if the ladder or staircase or the rope you're using was built incorrectly, then yes, there is often responsibility, if you can prove it, that the manufacturer, the original owner, the person who rented it to you, whatever, would be responsible for that ultimately.
So that person cannot go inside.
No,
because it's responsible.
But it's still an accident. Because remember, what the exile is meant to do here is not to say you're off scot-free. What the exile is meant to do here is keep the other people from killing you in revenge. Right? The exile is not the end. The exile is just, I need to get out of here so that I can be safe. what it's going to be contrasted to is certain cases where you don't have to run away because no one should think they have the right to kill you in revenge. So this is the layer that it's not always easy to see in the first read through the Torah, right? So this is the first part here is what seems normal in the Torah. You accidentally kill someone, the family gets angry, you run away. These are the cases. What we're going to see in the Mishnah is that there are other cases where you accidentally kill someone and the family shouldn't be angry. They might be upset, they're going to be sad, yes, but they shouldn't take revenge. And if they did take revenge, it would be revenge and murder. It wouldn't be justice. And therefore, you are able to just stay where you are. And that's going to be in part C1.
So in my example,
yeah.
The owner should go to exile because it was a kind of accident.
It's a kind of accident, but it isn't the kind of accident the Torah is talking about. So you would still be liable for financial damages, but you wouldn't be liable for being executed.
Okay.
Right? Unless you deliberately made the ladder break, then you're a murderer.
Okay.
All right, so C1 and 2 and 3 is going to give us the contrast.
C1, but if while he was pulling up the roller, fell back and killed somebody.
Mm-hmm.
If while he was raising a cask, the rope snapped, the cask fell and killed somebody. 3, if while going up a ladder, he fell down and killed somebody. It's not going to bench.
All right, so this is the part that, like I said, may not be obvious from the Torah itself, but the rabbis wanted to be very clear that exile was what happened when you were negligent. If it was a 100% totally bizarre accident, you don't have to run from anyone, right? It was just a very, very, very bad day. And we are sad and we bury the person, and I'm sure the person who caused the death is going to feel terrible, but there is no vengeance, there is no blood guilt, there is no need for exile. And all three of these categories are things that shouldn't be dangerous, right? Lifting the roller up, that's the safer time, right? Going up the ladder, that's the safer time. Raising up the cask, that's the safer time. So like I said in my opening example, if I'm driving down the road and I'm watching the road and I'm holding onto the wheel and I'm going the speed limit and somebody just drops in front of my car, I'm not a manslaughterer at all, right? I can go scot-free. The worst case example where this does happen from time to time is imagine somebody's driving a car through a neighborhood, they're going the speed limit, they're watching everywhere, they're not distracted, and a kid jumps in front of their car chasing the ball, right? You kill them, but you're not a manslaughterer, you're not a murderer, right? They'll do an investigation in modern American law, but you're absolutely not going to jail as long as you were not doing anything that made you negligent. Is the family upset? Of course the family's upset. Does the family have the right to hunt you down and kill you? No, absolutely not. And that's what we're trying to make as a distinction here as well. Make sense?
But still, in that safe case, it also could be an accident. Because let's say that you are
lowering the cask.
Okay, or whatever, drawing the barrel up at the cordon spring. What happens if you are doing and suddenly the muscle tight? It's fast shrill.
Yeah, the muscles are tight. Yeah,
the muscle tight.
Yeah, you get a cramp.
Yes. Or you have no heart attack or something happened to you, spouse.
Yes.
Okay. So it's a happening in a safe position, but still, it's not. It's an accident.
Right. So if well, let's do the general rule, right? The klal. So that's part 1 underneath there.
Okay. This is the general principle. Whenever the death was caused in the course of a downward movement, he goes into banishment. But if it was caused not in the course of downward movement, it's not going to banishment. All
right. So what are they trying to say here? It's not just about the direction of the arrow. It's about the level of risk, right? The downward direction means you're in a high-risk situation, and therefore you are responsible. The upwards arrow means you are in a low-risk situation, and therefore if something happens that is surprising, you're not responsible. Now, if something happens and you should have noticed, so for example, you're raising the barrel up and you're using a rope that's too thin, then yes, you are absolutely responsible for that. But if you're doing it in the normal way and it's not risky and something weird happens, that's not your fault, right? So you're lifting it up and, suddenly you have a heart attack. Yeah, that's not a problem. So that's what they're trying to get us to understand here, is that if it's high risk, high responsibility, low risk, low responsibility. But if you change the risk by your own behavior, then you can be responsible for that too.
I think still, people are people.
Yes.
And if somebody died, they get very upset.
Yes.
And they're always going to blame the guy that was somehow connected to the killing. So, my opinion, if I was that guy, I would run to a city like this.
Okay.
Just to be safe. Because you don't know what these people might do.
Okay. So that is one of the reasons why the rabbis are making this very clear. Because they want people not to take revenge. They want to stop that whole system of blood guilt, of blood vengeance. And so they're trying to make sure that everybody knows, yes, there are some things that require exile and there are some things that don't. But you know what? Better to let the courts figure it out. Don't run after and try to murder someone. Because if you kill somebody who is not in need of going to exile, you can be executed now, right? You're an actual murderer. Yeah. So the rabbis were really trying to clamp down on that type of behavior. And it worked. I mean, not just among them in their time, but how many of you, if you were, God forbid, in a car accident and somebody accidentally killed somebody that you cared about, how many of you would think that your first instinct would be, I'm going to catch him and kill him? And then you would actually do it. You might think it, right? You might want to, but would you be really likely to think that's the right thing to do, right? That guy, he went through a red light and he killed, my so-and-so. I'm going to go to his house and I'm going to put a bullet in his brain. I'm willing to bet that most of us, including most of at least the people in this country that I've, gotten to know pretty well in my life, would not actually do that. They might imagine it. They might even feel that fire rise up inside them, but they're not going to go and do it. They're going to say, no, I'll let the courts take care of this, right? The police know where he is. The DA is investigating. They'll find out whether this was a real crime or whether it was just one of those accidents. And I'll make sure that justice is done. I won't let them forget about my loved one. I'll make sure the case goes through. I'll make sure that there is justice, but I'll use the courts to find justice, not my own gun. Right? 99.999% of us do not think we should do justice on our own. Right? We think we should let justice happen with our effort, and our watching, but justice should happen through the police, through the lawyers, through the courts. And that's thanks to this, right? It's thanks to the beginnings that we can see even on the surface of the Torah. And if you dig deeper, you recognize the Torah doesn't want us hunting people down and killing them. The Torah wants courts. The Torah wants a trial and an investigation and witnesses and all of the things we've talked about in other sections. And that has been a blessing for the world. Because, yeah, it used to be that people would just go murder each other, take revenge for each other. And that's why this system was needed back then and why this system is not needed now. Why, when Israel in 1948 became independent, Israel did not recreate the cities of refuge. Because the culture was already to the point of, no, you don't take revenge like that. You don't murder people, you don't kill people just because of an accidental death or even because of an on-purpose death. We use the court system to take care of violence within our society. And that slow monopolization of violence has been one of the best ways of making peace in all of our communities. So on the whole, it's worked out. So yes, I know people, and I know what people want. And I also know what most people do. And thank God, that we have moved away from feeling that we really ought to take revenge with our own hands. And instead, generally, most people, almost all people, are able to find justice in different ways. All right, let's get a couple more examples on part 2.
If the iron slipped from its heft and killed somebody, a rabbi says, is not going to match.
Okay, go ahead and get the sages. That was Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, by the way.
Sages say it goes.
All right, so there's a disagreement here, right? So the question is, I've got my axe, and I'm in the forest, and I'm chopping the tree. And while I'm chopping, well, what happens, right? The axe flies off the handle. Or is it that what I hit flies off, right? Is it the axe or is it the metal? And that's where they are disagreeing, right? Is it that the axe itself flies off, or is it that the metal part that flies off? So the Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi believes that it is not the metal itself. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi believes that it is part of the wood that has done the killing, and therefore it's a freak accident. And the sages believe that it is the axe head itself, and that means you didn't properly maintain your axe, right? If you went into the forest and your axe head is a little loose, don't start cutting trees because that thing's going to fly off and it could kill someone. You know, the old saying, it'll put your eye out. And that means the sages say you go into banishes. So they disagree about the translation of how to read that verse, but really ultimately they agree, which is if it's a freak accident that I hit the tree and like a splinter flies, then you know what? That you don't go into banishment for. But on the other hand, if I hit the tree and the head flies off and the head was loose, then yeah, that was negligence. And that means I do have to go into banishment. Make sense? And then one more example.
And what happens if you do this and the ox is broke and part of the ox fly and kill someone?
So the rabbis considered the metal objects to be inherent. The Torah hints at this, to be inherently lethal, the metal. So if it's a part of the metal, then that meant you didn't check it properly, right? Because you have to treat every metal object as potentially lethal because they are deadly.
But happen accident, for example, the knife can broken.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens? The ox is broken in the middle of the work, and part of the broken ox fell, fly, and kill, for example, Yerach.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kills the guy next to you.
Yeah, the guy next to you. Is that accidental or not? Is that can you go to outside?
In general, the death that's caused by metal is considered a negligent death, right? Because that is considered more dangerous than wood.
Also in the situation that
the
stroke is an accident. It's not
so the fact that it's an accident doesn't mean that you didn't do anything wrong, right? It's like one of my favorite lines that my kids really love, and they always repeat, right? And they say, but I didn't mean to. And I'll say, but you weren't trying not to, right? Just having it be an accident doesn't mean that you have no responsibility. If you weren't actively avoiding causing the problem, then you're part of the problem. You're not as big a part of the problem as if you did it on purpose. But if you weren't taking effort, weren't taking steps to prevent it, like actually checking your axe before you go out in the forest, actually making sure that nobody is nearby you when you're cutting wood, then yeah, that's kind of on you. You know, it's if I were to be come over to your house and we were going to work on a project together, and you get out your metal saw, and it's like this old clunky, you know, saw, and it's just, you know, and the chain flies off and hits me. It was an accident. I know you would never do that on purpose. You probably couldn't plan it on purpose. But don't you think you have some responsibility for that?
Yes, but it's not the same as when you're using, like, for example, a knife, and the knife something for using it, cutting something,
right?
And someone is working next to you, like sometimes in the production, right, one is next to the other. It's broken, and one part is broken, like fly and kill someone else. It's right. Not like I didn't check the knife. The knife was perfectly before.
Right. So this is where you get into the details of each and every case, right? And that's where we go back to our general klal, right? The general rule. If the arrow is going up, it's, you know, generally it's not a risky situation. You're not responsible. If the arrow is coming down, it's a risky situation. You are responsible. So the judges would have to examine, How well did you take care of the knife? Had the knife ever broken before? Had you seen any cracks in the handles? Did we look at the knife? Do we see any flaws? Was the knife rusty? Was the knife already broken in other places? Have we had other broken knives in the same kitchen? Were you standing too close to someone while you were doing this? Were you using too much force while you were doing this? Those are all the kinds of questions that would need to be asked for details. And by the way, the same kinds of questions that people would ask in a modern court, right? If you're in a kitchen and like a restaurant and you're cooking and someone dies, they're going to be asking all those questions about what happened as well. And the verdict will depend on, I was using an old knife that was broken. I'd already broken 3 of them. I've got 3 cuts on my hands, and it was a big rush, and so I was just going as fast as okay, you're more responsible than the guy who says, I took the knife out of the wrapper, I stood in the far corner of the room, and I was cutting very carefully, and it slipped, bounced up, flew over, and landed in the guy's neck. That's a different level of responsibility, even though it's the same thing. So yeah, the details always matter. That's why we have only a general rule, because ultimately you have to stand in front of a court and look at the details. All right, so we now to get part I of part B of part 2.
Just left the flip from its heft, supposedly. Everybody has said doesn't want banishment, and Caesar said it does, he does.
Right.
And so, if it flew from the log being split, Rabbi says he goes into banishment, the opposite way you said, the other situation. And the sages said he does not go into banishment.
Right. So again, they're reading this as being whether or not the tree chip is something that should have been predictable as dangerous, or whether it's an accidental, right? So if you are hitting in a way where it's clear that it's going to cause danger, then this is a negligence. If you are hitting in a way that is not likely to cause danger, but it does kill someone anyway, then you couldn't have predicted that and you're off the hook, right? So that's what's happening here. But they're showing how reading even the same phrase, you can read it as being a dangerous way or a not dangerous way. And what they're trying to drive home here is that you have to understand the situation. If it's dangerous, and now you're negligent. If it's not dangerous and something happens, then you're not responsible. Good? Good. All right. It only gets more confusing. Part 2. Would anyone else like to read? Or are we moving around? Yeah, thanks for volunteering.
Part 2. The man threw a stone into the public domain and killed a person who goes into banishment. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, after the stone had left his hand, another person put out his head and caught it. The throw is exempt from banishment.
Okay, so I am standing in my courtyard, which is my private property, and I've got a nice rock in my hand, but I don't want the rock in my courtyard. So I take and I just throw it over the wall out of my domain. And there's somebody on the other side of that wall, and boom, the rock hits them in the head. I go into banishment, right? Exile for me, because I did something that was inherently risky, right? If I'm throwing it into the public domain, it's called public for a reason.
So that's why you don't go to exile.
No, it's not murder, because I didn't see the person and throw it at them.
But you are responsible because you know that there's a high risk that if I throw a stone, okay, someone can walk around,
right,
and I can kill someone.
But negligent manslaughter is not the same as first-degree murder, right? If I kill somebody by accident, even while doing something stupid, I'm not executed. I go into exile. It's the same in American law, right? If I am sitting at home and I am playing with my gun and I'm just going bam, 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 and I hit somebody who I couldn't see and who I would not want to be killed, I am not guilty of murder. I'm guilty of manslaughter. And in America, we do have prisons and other systems of punishment than they did in the ancient world. But I'm not a murderer. I'm a manslaughterer because I had no intent to kill the person.
So you want to tell me that there is less intent to kill someone if you throw a stone, okay, to the public domain than if you are working with the ox cutting a tree and the ox fell that
Yes.
way.
No, not less. It's the same.
So, but in one here said that that is not exact.
Because that's if you read it as being not the axe head, but as being a splinter from the tree. Right? If I'm hitting the tree and the piece of the wood flies off, then I'm not guilty. Right? But if I hit the tree and the axe flies off, now I am guilty. I mean, I'm guilty in both because I killed somebody. But in the wood splinter case, I am only guilty in my heart. In the axe flying case, I'm a manslaughterer, and I have to go to exile. And if I throw a rock over the wall, I'm an idiot, but I'm not a murderer. And so I go into exile. Right? Stupidity is not the same as intent. If I want to murder someone, that is a different crime than if I happen to kill someone.
So, but for the oaks, none of the part of the tree, the oaks, yes, you go inside, but you don't.
For the witch?
The oaks, that if you are cutting and I don't know, is far away from your the move, you do
Right.
that and something, oops, and continue that direction.
Then I go into exile.
You go to exile.
Yes, absolutely.
You are not murderer.
I'm a manslaughterer, but not a murderer.
Okay.
Right? It's a very important distinction.
Yes.
Right,
So
and-
it is a mystery.
Right. And eventually it will be sorted out in court, as we'll see in the Mishnah. But in the meantime, the family of my victim, they don't have the right to kill me if I kill them with a piece of wood. They do, according to the Torah, have the right to kill me if I killed them with the axe by accident, unless I get to the city and can take refuge. Right? So it becomes, an action movie of me trying to get away. All right. So here we have these two cases. One of them, I've got my rock. I throw it over the wall. I'm being stupid because, it could hit someone, and it does hit someone. I go into banishment. On the other hand, I have got a rock, and I'm throwing it down the alleyway to get out of the way. And when I look down the alleyway, there is nobody. Right? It is an empty alleyway. And I throw the rock down the alleyway, and as I let go, somebody walks out from behind one of the buildings, and the rock hits them. According to Rabbi Eliezer, I am not guilty of, and don't have to go to banishment. Right? I looked. It was clear. There was no one there.
So you don't go to banishment, okay,
Right.
fine, but doesn't prevent that someone from the family, they want to kill you.
Oh, doesn't prevent them from wanting to, but they have no legal right to kill me.
But that was the goal of banishment, to avoid that someone will kill you.
No.
Family.
Well, that's the goal for the individual. But the goal for the Torah is to make a distinction between whether you have a legal right to kill somebody who killed your loved one, or whether you don't have a legal right to kill someone. The Torah is not interested in how you feel. Well, it is. But for the first level, it's not interested in how you feel. It's interested in what you can and can't do that would be right or wrong. And what the Torah here is saying, according to Rabbi Eliezer, is that if you did your due diligence, it was clear, it was empty, and I just threw it down because that's perfectly normal, and then the guy came out, then you can't say that his family has a right to kill me, right? Because that's just a total 100% accident. Whereas if I didn't look, threw it backwards over my back and it hit someone, then yeah, now I am at least a little guilty, and I better go hide because the family would have the right to hunt me down if they wanted. But the court doesn't have the right to execute me as a murderer. I'm in between. Make sense? Okay. Part two.
Or two. If a man threw a stone into his own court and killed the person.
Right, so I'm still in my courtyard, and I'm throwing rocks, and the rocks stay in my courtyard. Right, it's in my yard.
Then the victim had a right of entry there. The thrower goes into banishment.
Right, so I've got my gardener's there, but I'm also working on some of the rocks, and I take one of the rocks and I throw it over the hedge, and my gardener's there. Well, he's supposed to be there, and it hits him. That means it's on me, right? I am negligent. I have to go into banishment, right? And if not, right, then the thrower goes into banishment. And if not,
he does not go into banishment.
Right, but some crook is on my property, and I didn't know he was there, and I'm throwing rocks over the hedge, and I happen to hit him. He wasn't supposed to be there. Right? He had no right to be there. He's a trespasser, exactly. So I'm not responsible for accidentally killing him. Right? It's still tragic, even if he wasn't a crook. I mean, even if he is a crook, it's still tragic that he died. But I'm not a manslaughterer for accidentally killing him when he had no business being there. Make sense? Okay. As it says, get the proof text.
As it says, is when a man goes into the forest with his neighbor, Deuteronomy 19:5, the forest is a domain accessible to the victim and to the slave, and it therefore excludes the court of the householder where the victim has no right of entry.
All right, so why does the Torah give us the example of forest? It's asking the Mishnah, because the forest is open to everyone. Right? Everyone has the right to be there. So it's not just a random example that the Torah wants to use. It's a very specific example to teach us that you're only responsible if you and the victim both have a right to be where you are. Right? If that person doesn't have the right to be in your domain, you're not responsible for their safety. Now, it doesn't mean you get to murder them on purpose, right? But it does mean that you can't be hunted down by their family when they had no business being there. And, you can easily, again, imagine this in American law for a comparable connection. If you wander into a construction site and you have no business being there, you just wanted to see the new apartments being built, and they drop a load of bricks on you by accident, that's very different than if you're a worker in the construction site and a load of bricks gets dropped on you. It may feel the same to you, you're dead, and it may feel the same to your family, but there is a difference between whether they should have known you were there and should have been careful with you, and he wandered in and they had no business being there, he had no training to be there, we weren't expecting him to be there. How could we have prevented this from happening? See the difference? Good.
Number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Abba Shaul says, hewing of wood is an optional act, and it is therefore excludes a father beating his son, or a master disciplining his pupil, or an agent of the court administering the lashes.
All right, so this one may make people a little uncomfortable. So why, says Abba Shaul, does the Torah mention going out and cutting wood? Because cutting wood is something that you always have a choice. I want to cut wood, I don't want to cut wood. I want to cut wood today, I want to cut wood tomorrow. It's your choice. But if you're doing something that you have to do, you don't have a choice. If you are the court representative who has to do the lashes, it is your job to do the lashes. And if you lash someone and you're doing it the legal way, with the court's permission, exactly the right number, and the person dies, you're not responsible. Right? Because you didn't have a choice. You had to be lashing that person. You had to whip them. That was what the court ordered you to do for them.
Yeah, but that's being Rosh Katan, because if you see the other guy, he's suffering.
Yeah. So we
go
will
in front of them and it's weak. You can say, what, sorry, let's stop.
Eventually we'll get there. And eventually we're going to actually talk in Makkot. Eventually we'll talk about Makkot. We'll talk about the actual whipping. But for right now, just assume that this is a perfect case where you have a guy the court has already examined, they are sure that he can take the whipping, and you step up and you hit him with the first whip and the guy has a heart attack and falls over dead. Are you a manslaughterer? No, because you were doing the job the court ordered you to do. The other two are probably going to make people a little bit more uncomfortable. If you're already uncomfortable with this, what Abba Shaul is saying is that in his day, a father who had a kid that was misbehaving was required to hit the kid. Right? You had to. If you didn't do it, you were neglecting your duty as a parent. And if, when you were hitting your kid, the kid died, you were not guilty. You were just doing your job as a dad. And so too, a teacher was required to discipline the students. And if the kid happened to drop dead while you did it, within the normal parameters of what was accepted at the time, of what was normal for discipline. You know, if you take out a sword and you discipline them, then no. But you just discipline them with a stick or whatever was normal, and the kid happens to drop dead, you're not responsible because you were doing what you were supposed to be doing. Now, do we agree with that level of violence where there's even a chance that a kid could possibly die from such a thing? No, not in the modern world, because we have other techniques that allow us to discipline our children without resorting to violence in almost every situation. In their situation, however, that was not an option, right? They had not yet developed all of those techniques. Their society had not yet put in the infrastructure, the groundwork, to be able to let parents raise their kids and for teachers to teach without the need for violence. I'm sure sometimes people have felt like doing so, whether as a teacher or whether as a parent. Maybe at some point you really, really wanted to discipline your child. But let me tell you, if that's when you're disciplining your child, you're not doing it for the child's sake, you're doing it for your own, because you're letting your anger out on the kid, right? You had to be able to discipline, just like a member of the court, which meant you weren't hitting them because you were angry, you were hitting them because that was what was needed for the moment. And most people, when they go to discipline their kids or their students, are usually doing it because they're angry at the student or the child, or they're frustrated with the student or the child, not because they want to make the child better. And that's one of the reasons why it's good that we have generally found better ways to discipline. Although, unfortunately, people still find ways to discipline that is against the person they're disciplining rather than trying to help them. Okay, Makkot 2-3. Yeah, do you want to volunteer? Natan, do you want to volunteer? And you have the alternative translation, right?
Yes.
Okay. I just didn't want anybody to be surprised when you read different words.
A father is exiled on account of his son, and the son is exiled on account of his father.
Okay, this is not the father suffering for the crimes of the child, not the child suffering for the crimes of the father. This is if a father and son go out to the forest cutting wood, and the axe flies off and kills one of them, then the other one goes into exile. Okay? We're not talking about the father does it and the kid runs away. We're talking about the father does it to his son. Then the father has to go into exile. And vice versa. If the son accidentally kills his father, the son has to go into exile. Understood?
But not for fear of revenge of the family.
Ah.
Because it's my family.
Okay. So why is this such an important point? Because if we think this law is only because of the fear of the family, then I shouldn't have to go into exile if I accidentally killed my son. Because what? My other sons are going to kill me, right? My wife might kill me, but I don't have to fear the blood relatives because I am the blood relatives. And that's why this is trying to show us that this isn't just about the anger of a person. This is about justice. If you accidentally kill somebody while you were being negligent, then banishment is the punishment. It's not just the retreat. It's not just the refuge. It's actually part of the punishment. And therefore, even if you accidentally kill someone for whom no one else will be coming for you, you still need to go to the city. You still have to go to the city of refuge.
It's very interesting that you didn't add one more sentence, because if I was them, I will add one more sentence to the Mishnah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you kill by accident and your sibling, your brother and your sister, each of us will go in exile on account of the other one.
I think perhaps because we have enough examples of siblings not always treating each other with a loving heart, that becomes a little bit harder to hold on to.
I mean, siblings under the age.
Oh, you mean minors?
Minors.
Right. Well, minors aren't responsible anyway.
Well, minors, or let's say less than
15-year-olds?
50, yeah, 15, 16, okay, not like adults, okay, like really like under 18.
But under 18, they are still held liable for their crimes. And once they're bar and bat mitzvah, they're held liable.
Yeah, but if they have that's why if they have an accident and one killed the other in an accident, okay, they should add also to that sentence.
You mean, well, but the Mishnah tells us elsewhere that once you are of bar and bat mitzvah age, the law applies equally to you. Now, interesting.
If say the son and father, why
Right.
not between siblings?
Right. I suppose. I think you accomplish the same with the one example rather than two. And the Mishnah generally tries to be brief and not add additional examples if they aren't teaching additional points. But yes, it could also use that. Could have used that example. All right, part two.
Yes. All are exiled on account of a Jew. The Jew is exiled on their account, except on account of a resident alien.
Okay.
And what's happening to someone that is converting in the process?
So a convert is considered an Israelite, is considered a Jew. So they are in that category. However, a resident alien, a ger toshav, in the Talmud, they make it clear that what this means is this is not a idolater. This is not an Israelite or somebody who converted to Judaism. This is somebody who actually follows the Noahide laws, right? That when we talk about, in this case, a ger toshav, we're talking a resident alien, we're talking about somebody who is following the 7 laws of all of humanity, and therefore they are considered to be pre-warned, and there is no right of retreat, right? They are considered to be at a higher level of warning in this particular case. So therefore, they don't get to run away, right? They are considered to be 100% responsible, even if it was 100% of just a mistake, but by negligence. So it's a very unusual case where there's a stringency that's held against them that isn't held against anyone else.
Yeah, because it's justice, not everyone is equal in the justice system.
Well, in many cases, yes. I mean, that's not that unusual. You know, the laws for a Kohen are different than the laws for the rest of us. The laws for women are different than the laws for men in some cases. The laws in the ancient world for a free person were different than the laws for a slave. So justice wasn't always exactly identical one-to-one for everyone. And the Talmud goes into more explanations of exactly why, but we'll probably just leave that there.
But a resident alien is not exiled except on account of a resident alien.
Right? So they are only responsible vis-a-vis people that are equal to them. And that is unique for them. All right, now we'll get into another unusual case.
A blind person is so exiled.
Is what?
So exiled.
Is so exiled?
So.
As the words of Rabbi Yehuda, or?
No, before. So Rabbi Yehuda Meir says, it's before that, say a blind person is so exiled.
Okay, because my copy says a blind person is not exiled.
Really?
That's Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Meir says, yes, he is exiled. He is banished. One second. Let me just check the Hebrew.
Here say that an enemy is not exiled.
Oh, the enemy comes next.
Sorry. So Rabbi Yehuda Meir says, he is exiled, and enemy is not exiled.
Hold on a second. No. Hasoma eno golel, right? Golel. The blind person is not exiled.
Not exiled.
Yeah. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, right? That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion.
Yeah. So
Rabbi Meir Omer Goleh, that he is exiled.
He's exiled, correct. So
Right.
it's a mistake. It's not so it's not exiled.
Right. So Rabbi Meir says exile. Rabbi Yehuda says no exile. So yeah, because Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that somebody who is blind can't be held responsible for the damage that they might cause because they can't see what's going on around them. And Rabbi Meir says one law for everybody, right? If you're blind or not blind, you are responsible the same way everyone else is.
He said that there's differences in wood.
Right. And halacha goes according to Rabbi Yehuda, just because I knew you would ask me that. So I double checked. Right. So blind people are not considered to be equally negligent as sighted people because they lack the ability to see all of the possibilities around them. So therefore, they are considered less responsible and less liable for the damage. All right, part 4. Just making your little emendation.
An enemy is not excited.
Okay, so.
What is the definition of enemy?
What is the definition of an enemy? Because the Torah talks about this and gives a bit of a hint to it. But we have to get a little more detail. So an enemy officially under halakha becomes defined as somebody who has not spoken to you for 3 days because of anger. Right? That is the official definition of an enemy. So it's not very high. You don't have to be like they've hated you for years. They don't have to be they attacked you in public. But if we had an argument and you're like, I'm not talking to you for 3 days, and we're out in the forest cutting wood, and you come back and I don't.
So your wife can be your enemy by that definition.
If it is out of anger for 3 full days,
yes.
By that definition, for that time period, but as soon as you start talking again, they're no longer an enemy. Right? The enemy can come and go. It's not permanent. You don't become an enemy forever. God forbid. Not just for our spouses, but for anyone. So the idea here is that if I've been having a fight with you and we go out together and only one of us comes back, chances are there was some foul play, right? We can't just say this was an accident. And the Torah itself already tells us that we don't treat enemies the same way that we treat just other people. So if you come back and you say, oh yeah, it was terrible, the axe flew off, it hit him, I'm going to go to the city of refuge now. Like, whoa, 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 whoa. No. Going to the city of refuge is for other people, not for enemies, right? We're going to have a court case right here, right now. And in fact, if you get caught by the family, by the relatives, they won't be guilty if they take you out because you were a known enemy to this person before the death happened. And then Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda is going to give a little more detail on that.
Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says, an enemy is to be put to death because he's like one for war.
All right, so this is an extremely strong statement, one which doesn't follow halakha eventually. But what he's saying is, if 2 people go into the forest and they're enemies and only one comes back, we don't need witnesses. We don't need people who say they weren't him. No, he loses. He loses. Right? Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda is saying, 2 guys go out, one comes back in, and they were enemies. It's clear what happened. Kill him. Execute him. Right? Because we don't need witnesses for what happened. We know what happened. They had a fight. Right? And he killed him, and now he's pretending like it was an accident. I don't need witnesses who said, do you understand that what you are about to do is going to lead to the death sentence? Yes, I understand that would lead to the death sentence, and then do it. No, he's an enemy. That is Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda's opinion. Rabbi Shimon says, no. Wait.
There's an enemy who is to be exiled, and there's an enemy who is not to be exiled. This is the general rule. If it can be said he killed wittingly, he's not to be exiled. But if he did not kill wittingly, he is to be exiled.
Right. On purpose. B'mezid. Right. So you either do it on. You have to check if you did it accidentally. If we think it was accidental, then we can go into exile and we'll do more investigating. On the other hand, if it's pretty clear that it was on purpose, like 2 of them went out there and there was a knife sticking out of his back, that's probably not an accident. Then we can go ahead and try him as a murderer without worrying about the banishment and all of that.
So the general rule is like a general rule for everyone else. There's not any differentiation for the enemies.
Well, yes, but that's what he's trying to draw our attention to, is that we can have a different suspicion, right? If it looks like it probably was an accident and you're not an enemy, then we'll assume it's an accident. If it looks like it's probably an accident and you are an enemy, we'll look harder. Right? We will be very, very sure that it was not done accidentally. So there is still a difference between enemy and non-enemy. But what Rabbi Shimon is trying to make sure we do is we don't treat enemies as automatic guilty.
No, I was that one. The Torah is clear in that. It
Yeah.
say if they go to the forest
Yeah.
and they not enemy before, it's it's different.
Right. We don't assume that it was murder.
Enemy before is
Yeah.
It's clear.
Which the general rule really should be, don't go wood cutting with your enemies. That's the general rule. All right, 2-4. Yoel, would you like to read, or want to pass?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we're back over here then,
Yes.
Richard. 2-4. Yeah.
So back.
Yeah, they flipped the
2-4. Okay, 2-4. Where are they banished?
good question. All right, we keep talking about exile and banishment. Where do you go?
Cities of refuge. 3 cities situated on the far side of the Jordan. 3 cities situated,
Mm-hmm.
as it says, 3 cities shall be designated beyond the Jordan. The 3 shall be designated.
Right, so Numbers 35, right, Bamidbar, God tells us that we need to set up these cities. And it says there are going to be 3 that are in Canaan, in the land of Israel proper, and there'll be 3 across the Jordan, and those will be in the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, or part of Manasseh, that took territory on the other side of the Jordan, even though that wasn't part of the original plan. And what the Torah is trying to tell us there is that you need to have cities of refuge wherever we live. Right, so you shouldn't make somebody who lives in the far part of the tribe of Reuben have to run all the way back and across the Jordan River to get to safety. And the rabbis go into much more detail of how these cities were spread out so that nobody would be too far from one of the cities.
So they are not the specific names of cities.
Eventually, they were designated, but to begin with, it depended upon the distances that people lived. But they weren't named at this point.
Because the problem is what happens if there's an enemy like a Rome or some enemy conquer the cities,
Yeah.
and they not allow people to go to enter to the cities.
It's not so good, is it?
No.
Yeah, you need to have a way to be able to get them. That's why it was more flexible, but they would be designated. It wouldn't just be like, go to any city. The cities themselves had to have that special status.
So who decided it, or who changed designation?
The Sanhedrin, of course, yes. Yeah, they're in charge of all of this. All right, so we get another interesting midrash in part 2, which is going to be trying to help us understand this whole picture.
Not until 3 cities were selected in the land of Israel. The first 3 cities beyond the Jordan received food. It says 6 cities of refuge in all.
Which means...
Until all 6 could simultaneously receive food.
All right, so here's the problem that the midrash halacha, but the Mishnah is trying to sort out, which is the Israelites came up and were getting ready to go into the Jordan, across the Jordan into the land of Israel. So they were standing in what we now would call the modern day state of Jordan. They already have cities that they could use for refuge of the people who live in Gad, Reuben, Manasseh, right? They've already got that territory. So does that mean people could already start running there? And they're saying, no, you had to wait until the cities in Israel were also set up, because you needed 6 cities total in order for all of them to work, right? For any of them to work, all of them had to be there. So even though they got to Jordan first, you had to wait until the rest of Israel was established with its own cities before the first cities were also operational.
Because also the Brit wars with the angel of the land of Israel that we are talking this Shabbat.
Exactly right.
So that makes sense that nothing kick off until you conquer the land.
Exactly.
No
Exactly.
matter the situation.
All right, looking at the time. Yes, we can do one more, I think, for tonight. So we're on Makkot 2:5. Yeah? Yes, lucky you.
Mishnah 5. And direct roads were made leading from one to the other. As it says, you should prepare the way and divide the borders of your land into 3 parts.
All right, so
Deuteronomy.
exactly. So Deuteronomy 19 says that you have to divide the land up, meaning that there's equal parts for people to go to. And they're saying that you actually had roads that went directly from one to the other. So that way, A, it would be easy to go because roads make travel easier, but also the roads would serve as like a border. If you're on this side of the road, you go to this city. If you're on that side of the road, you go to this city. It was a way of marking which way you needed to run if you were in this situation. Make sense? Pretty clear.
It's an hypothetical question. What happens if somebody kills somebody by mistake?
Right.
A piece of metal
Right.
flew and hit somebody. What happened to this guy until he gets to the city of refuge? If the family can chase him and
Read part 2.
Part 2.
Read part 2. You are right on. You are right on cue.
Part 2, and they delegated to him 2 disciplines of
Disciples
of the sages. Oh, as escorts, okay. In case anyone attempt to slay him on the way, and that they might speak to him.
All right. So,
okay, I spoke too early.
well, no, you were right on cue because if you had the question, it meant you were ready for the answer. So, yeah, here's the problem, which is I'm on my way to the city of refuge, but the family's faster than me. So what happens? Well, according to the Torah, if the family catches you, they can kill you. According to the rabbis, we'd rather that didn't happen, right? Because clearly the Torah wants you to live. They don't want this whole blood vengeance, blood feud kind of thing. So how about if we have a couple guys go with you who can argue with the family when they show up and say, no, 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 guys, you really don't want to do this. He's going to the city of refuge. This was an accident. It definitely wasn't murder. You don't need to kill him, blah, 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 and try to convince the family not to kill him. So that's what the sages say. But yes, technically, the family would still have the right to kill him before he gets into the city.
Yeah, but it's another way. Also, if you have 2 guys that try to convince them not to kill, also you can use witnesses because they
Yes.
try to prevent the killer.
Exactly right.
So you can sentence them to.
If they commit murder, but it's not actually murder if they kill the manslaughterer. Right? It's not recommended. Right? The Torah clearly frowns upon it, but it is legal. And so we need to put precautions to try and talk them out of their blood vengeance. And that's really what this whole chapter is about, is trying to avoid blood vengeance. One, by taking all the people who committed totally innocent manslaughter and saying, these people don't even have to run. And then taking the people who did commit negligent manslaughter and trying to convince their families not to kill them, right? Just let them go into the exile, let them go into banishment. So it's all about trying to avoid personal justice. Because as soon as you take justice into your own hands, everything gets worse. You may feel better for a moment, but it just becomes a cancer in the whole society, eating away as everyone tries to kill everyone else. Or everyone is afraid that everyone else is going to kill them. All right, Rabbi Meir, let's finish it up.
Rabbi Meir says he may even plead his cause himself, as it says, and this is the word of the manslayer. Deuteronomy 19:4.
All right, so in addition that, yes, the people might be chasing him, the Torah is already hinting that you don't even need, you shouldn't even need the sages to be at his side, to be escorts. The person should be able to convince them, look, I admit that what I did was an accident and it was wrong. I'm going into exile. That should be enough to prevent the people from killing him. Now, Rabbi Meir is probably not arguing that they don't also need an escort, but he's saying that you shouldn't really need an escort. Pardon me. That you shouldn't really need an escort because everybody should take a breath and realize that killing this guy on the road is not what the Torah actually wants. Right? What the Torah wants is that somebody who is negligent and committed a crime should be punished by going into exile, but that should be the only death that happens. The manslaughter should be the only death that happens. And that one we couldn't avoid. This murder, well, this death we can avoid. Make sense? All right. We'll leave it there for tonight. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll pick up with 2:6 next week.
So what happened? You are sitting today in the shoe.